One of the things that I most often get asked about is how I do the lining on my locomotives and stock, and I wanted to show you how I do it. It's a little bit tedious, but I think it gives good results. It's certainly not the way that everybody does it, but it works for me. So far I've lined over 14 locomotives in the fleet, and I'll need to do many more. The one I'm working on today is a Hornby 8F that I've resprayed in Vauxhall Regatta Blue. Because I'm going to be doing this upside down, it's the first time I've done it on camera. Handily, this is quite a heavily weathered locomotive, so I can always cover up any errors later on. As you can see, I've done one side of the tender already, the other is plain blue. I always work on a gloss finish, don't use a matte surface if possible. The transfers for this side come from a Fox transfer set. These are Waterslide transfers, and this set is intended for an LMS Princess Coronation class Pacific, but it's suitable for the Stanier tender, and what's quite nice is it has the curves ready cut, although the sizing isn't quite correct. The Princess Coronations have a longer coal space compared to the 8F, so whilst the overall dimensions are more or less spot on, the top bar is longer than what I need and the space after the curve at the back is shorter, but we can fix this. First of all, the tools you need for the job. A soft paintbrush, a dish for water, some microsole. This is for softening transfers and enabling you to move them about. It also helps them contour to different curves and shapes. You also need some tweezers and a craft knife. I use a Swan Morton blade because they're really good and you can replace the blades on them. I always cut up the transfers first. Never try and put an entire set on in one go. This prevents panic setting in when things start to go wrong. Trying to work with a large transfer all at the same time is just asking for trouble. What I usually do is separate them into corners and sides. Fill the dish up with some warm water. The warmer the water is, the quicker the transfer will come off. It takes about 25 seconds for it to come off the backing paper. In the meantime, I'll use the brush to apply some microsole to the area that I want to put the transfer on. I'll gently check with the tweezers whether the transfer is ready to come off the paper. Notice I've made the mistake here of leaving all the lettering on, so that all comes off too, so these little guys are going to have to be fished out. I'll more or less position the transfer where I want it. Use the tweezers to hold the end still, tease it off the backing paper, and then slide the backing paper away. This is much easier than getting it tangled around your fingers. As you can see, the transfer tries to stick to the nearest corner. Then I'll use the paintbrush to just gently tease it off the edge. It doesn't matter if it doesn't go exactly where you want it to, as long as the transfer stays wet, you'll still be able to move it around. Every now and again I might apply a little more microsole or a little more water with a paintbrush. But be careful, you want to put it on a damp surface, not a wet surface. A wet surface will cause the transfer to move around too much. What you can see I'm doing at the moment is pushing water out as it's nearing its final position. I'll wipe the brush on the foam that I'm using as a rest to try and get rid of the water. The brush will soak up the water from the area that I'm working on. Gently brushing the transfer helps get the water bubbles out and enables the transfer to sit flat against the surface. Once the first one is on, leave it. This is the most important thing. People rush it and then the next transfer that they put on will pick up the first one and they'll both start moving about and it's really hard to get them to stay still. The best thing is leave it for 5 minutes and then come back to it when it's dry. The thing I do with all my transfers is try and overlap the edges. Because they're all from the same sheet, they're all the same width, and you shouldn't get any problems in differing sizes. tiny bit of overlap isn't really noticeable from normal viewing distances. Most importantly, don't panic. Even if things aren't going your way, you can always rework it using a little bit of water or a little bit of microsol. The only point of no return is when it's completely dry. Here you can see I'm repeating the process, leaving the transfer to dry for 5 minutes, coming back to it, using fresh water, it's nice and warm, leave it for about 30 seconds, put some microsol onto the area you're applying the transfer to, slide it on, and just work into position using the tweezers and the paintbrush. The light touch is essential here. Don't be heavy-handed with it. It can be tedious and you might find that you're holding your breath the whole time, but it is worth it. Keep repeating this method, but make sure to change the water for warm water because cold water will mean the transfer doesn't separate as easily from the backing film. This is where we have to get a little bit crafty. We need to cut a little bit of straight section out of the top lip of the transfers. I'm cutting it as close to the corner as I can. Remember, work on one section at a time, don't bite off more than you can chew. This little guy can sit in this corner here. Which means that once that's dry, I can apply a little bit more microsol. Get the corner and put it on the other side. Fox transfers have a huge range of styles, so if you're doing a fictional livery like mine, then they might even have something that will work for you. I found this just by searching through their catalogue. What's really useful is they also do generic sets of straights and corners, which you can use to fit any loco you want. It takes a bit longer, but for a custom job, it's a really useful tool to have. Just teasing this straight line together. The straight lines are the hardest bit to get right, and you want to keep teasing it until it's correct. There we go, done. Here's a cruel close-up. I'm pretty pleased with that. For something that's going to go on a layout, I'm perfectly happy with it. And the most important thing is, if you're not happy with it, you can always redo it later. I can't stress this enough. Don't think you have to get it right the first time. Everything is practice, and you can always repeat it another time. The more you do it, the better you'll get. So don't be afraid, jump in, and have a go. I hope this was useful and it encourages more of you to try out lining out your own locos. I'm planning to do more tutorials like this to show the bodging methods that I use. As I say, they're not professional, but they work for me, and hopefully they'll work for you too.